Hey, everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia back with the latest episode, the latest installment, if you will, of the Code Reds podcast, talking all things Cincinnati Reds baseball. It is my sincere pleasure, and I've been meaning to get this next guest on all season long, Annie Sabo, the daughter of the one and only Spuds. It's great to welcome you on to this podcast. Annie, I'm glad we could finally work out the timing to get you on the broadcast. You, by the way, of course, not only the daughter of a very famous Reds baseball player, but you do an outstanding job both for Reds Live when you fill in for Brian Giesenslaw and when you sideline report like you did Monday night, and you're doing all week on this road trip through Miami and Milwaukee for Bally Sports Ohio. Welcome, Annie Sabo.
Wow, that was quite the introduction. I think I feel better about myself already today. Trags, thanks for having me. Happy to finally hop on here and chat with you.
Yeah, so let's get to I'm going to start with Hunter Greene because I think he's a fascinating case. He is having an outstanding season. I think everybody knows he made his first All-Star game. Unfortunately, he gave up the 2-run homer to Jarren Duran, was the losing pitcher in the All-Star game down in Texas. But his regular season numbers are what really matter to Reds fans. And to say this has been a breakout season is an understatement. 8-4, 2.83 ERA. In 22 starts, 130 innings, which is an accomplishment in and of itself through 22 starts, and 149 strikeouts. And yet he is still not the pitcher of the month after posting a 2-0 record. He gave up one earned run, Annie, in the month of July, and Dylan Cease was still the National League pitcher of the month. Your thoughts?
You know, I think it was the snub of the month for sure. I mean, I think his last 5 starts, I said last night, I think he has a .27 ERA across his last 5 starts. I mean, his month of July was incredible, and I understand that Dylan Cease pitched a no-hitter. I understand that, but I think Hunter Greene's total collective body of work for the month of July, I think he deserved to win that award. I spoke to him yesterday about it, and I said, hey, I think it was the snub of the month. What do you think? And he kind of deflected it a little bit, in typical Hunter Greene fashion, very respectful, as always, very thoughtful. But he said to an extent, he's happy to enjoy some of the success that he's experiencing so far this season. But again, he said, I realize how much work is still left to be done to finish out this season extremely strong. And so I found that really telling. I mean, in the back of his mind, I'm sure he was probably feeling a little bit, I don't know, feeling like he deserved the award to a certain extent, but just his ability to deflect and give other people in the league credit, I think, is just telling of his character, which is so unique for a 24-year-old.
Yes, I would agree with that, Annie. And I think his maturity from the moment that he really came into the organization, the moment he was brought up to the Reds in 2022, that first start we all remember in Atlanta, he has demonstrated a poise beyond his years. The results weren't always there, but that's going to happen when you're a young pitcher in Major League Baseball. The results aren't going to always be there, but it's how you handle the downtimes, how you don't let things spin out of control. He never did that. And that's what I think. That's why the Reds, Bob Castellini and Phil Castellini and Nick Krall, offered him that contract extension at such a young age, because they saw the maturity that you were just talking about.
Yeah, and I think I was talking to him, and he had to head out to the field to do warm-ups yesterday, and so he just said, come walk with me, we'll finish the conversation. And I did. And I just said to him yesterday, for your age to be able to not only go through the downs that you've experienced, but also to be so even-keeled when you're experiencing success is something that I really admire about you. And he said he credits his family to helping him kind of stay that way. We know he's extremely close with his family. Yes. His mom and dad and brother and sister travel quite well to watch him pitch. But I just thought, I mean, myself at 24 years old, experiencing lows and experiencing highs like that, and to be able to stay so calm, cool, and collected in every situation, and to give the best answers, and to be, so thoughtful and everything. I just think that's something that is really unique with Hunter. And I just so enjoy talking to him every time in the clubhouse because he gives you the time of day. I mean, yes, he is a quote unquote superstar. He's doing fabulous things. But just how he treats everyone is something that I really admire about him.
Yep, and I can appreciate that, but not only to your point, being 24 and doing what he's doing and handling everything, all the responsibility. Remember when we were 24? Imagine us being 24 and being in the national spotlight. Granted, he has been in the spotlight from a young age since the moment he came out of high school in California, but still to be that young, handling everything on a very public stage, that's what stands out to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as I said, to put myself in his shoes at 24 years old, some of the decisions weren't all there. And I think I was in Tampa, Florida at 24 years old in my second TV job. But just the level of maturity he has is just, I mean, we just touched on it, is just, it's really incredible.
Right.
A word I would use to describe. I'm looking forward to seeing him pitch next time out. It's been, electric to watch, as has Elly Cruz, but it's just like, you think about it and you think about the Reds' future and you think about Hunter Greene and Elly Cruz. I mean, it makes me excited. I know this season hasn't turned out as a lot of us had hoped, but I mean, looking long term, I think Reds fans should be excited.
I do too. And look, in a very disappointing season, and this is a Reds podcast in which a lot of fans who are watching this had very high hopes for this season. To see the way it's turned out is what it is. But to me, if there's one biggest takeaway, Elly Cruz is having a fantastic year. But the number one takeaway is the maturity and the maturation and the development of Hunter Greene in that rotation. If you're going to compete for World Series, you need a top of the rotation guy, a stud who's going to be there day in and day out, a guy you can point to. That is our clear, undisputed number one. And that's what Hunter Greene has turned into this year. And that's why it's my biggest takeaway.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely emerged to be the team's ace. And I just feel like our starting pitching for the most part this season, despite the record not being there, starting pitching has been there in a rotation that's so young, which makes me excited about the future. Do I think offensively some pieces need to be added in the offseason? Yeah. But I think from a starting pitching perspective, even the bullpen, I feel like that's been pretty solid all season long, which is a plus because we haven't always seen that in the last trio of seasons.
Right. And, I think the bullpen's been less worn out this season. And, going back to the trade deadline, for those who don't pay attention deep in the weeds, one of the reasons those trades were made, especially Lucas Sims, is when you don't have players with options, it really limits what the GM can do with their bullpen and bring up pitchers and option pitchers out when pitchers get tired at the major league level. And, you need reinforcements at the major league level. Nick Kroll and company were really limited in that regard. So that's one of the reasons Lucas Sims was traded. Your reaction to Frankie Montas being dealt?
In all honesty, I was in, where was I? Nationals Park. I was doing sideline reporting in that series. And one of my reports, I was going around the clubhouse asking some guys about, how they handle the trade deadline. Do they talk about it? Do they not talk about it? I mean, I think Jonathan India was the most honest in saying, yes, I know I'm a subject of a lot of trade rumors. Yes, we talk about it. Yes, it's part of the business. It's just kind of hard to avoid. But in Washington, D.C., I went up to Frankie and I was going to ask him about it, being one of the, elder statesmen of the clubhouse. And he said, don't ask me. I'm on the trading block. Ask someone else. And he just kind of walked away and said, how I handle it is I just don't think about being traded.
Yeah.
And I mean, come to find out, I wasn't there on the trade deadline. Frankie Montas gets dealt away to Milwaukee. So it'll be interesting and fun catching up with him just to see what his week has been like when I head to Milwaukee next. But
yeah.
It's hard because I do think that Frankie was personality-wise a great addition to the clubhouse. I personally loved Frankie as a person. I think that he had some struggles this season. I don't necessarily know why, because after repeated post-game interviews, he said he felt like his stuff was all there. So maybe it's just a matter of pitch sequencing and kind of figuring out what is working and in what way for him. So maybe
Right.
he'll be able to figure that out in Milwaukee. I'm not sure, but I mean, the results have not necessarily been there. He's a little bit older. He was signed to a 1-year deal, correct? So
Right.
I see
Correct.
why the Reds did that, but from a personality standpoint, I really did love Frankie, and I think he was a valuable asset from a veteran leadership perspective and helping some of the young guys on the rotation, like a Hunter Greene. Hunter spoke about it. I mean, he did, bounce several ideas throughout the season off of Frankie. So I think that adds some value. But, on pen and paper, the results for Montas, unfortunately, just not there.
So he could return next year. He was very vocal about he'd love to return to Cincinnati. And the reason he would fit in 2025, Annie, I think, is because this franchise, this club, can always use veteran leadership. And, when you look at the 2023 roster, the thing that I thought going into the offseason they needed to do was add veterans with winning acumen, with winning backgrounds, the experience of having been in a pennant race. And that's what they did in 2009. Everybody remembers and refers to Scott Rowland, and the Reds made that acquisition at the 2009 trade deadline. It paid huge dividends the next 3 seasons, 2 of which ended in division titles. I think the Reds could use a guy like Frankie Montas, bring him back. He's certainly loved and respected inside that clubhouse. But it'll be interesting to see, which way they decide to go in terms of building leadership. Leadership, to me, Annie, is one of those intangibles that do matter. And you can have all the talent in the world, but you need a voice or two. Okay, I'm rambling a little bit here, but I want to talk about Jonathan India and why I think not trading him was a very good thing for the Reds going forward into 2025. I've never understood the fan criticism of Jonathan India totally. I just don't get it. Maybe it's because I'm around him. I see how he handles himself in the clubhouse. Like Hunter Greene, I see how he handles not just the good times, but the down times. And he is a guy to me that is kind of a rock in that clubhouse that guys gravitate towards.
Yeah, speaking of leadership, I think that's one of the reasons why Jonathan India wasn't dealt to the Yankees per all the rumors. He is like TJ Friedl, in my opinion. They bring the intangibles every single day. I mean, yes, Jonathan India had a great game against Miami on Monday, but beyond that, even when he's struggling, he is a leader, on the field, in the clubhouse, regardless. I mean, a lot of players look up to him. And I think that is, despite being younger, as Jonathan India is, he's, I guess, maybe one of the elder statesmen because he's been around inside the clubhouse. But I mean, I think it was a great move to keep India. I don't understand, which we've talked about before, all of the hate that's generated toward India.
He's never done anything, Annie, that you say, wow, that was irresponsible. That was a jerk thing to do. How did he show up his teammate like that? How did he not hustle out a play? He makes mistakes. He doesn't have great range at second base. We understand that. He understands that. He's worked on it. He's a better second baseman now than he was when he started his big league career. But is he Matt McClain at second? No. Even though Matt McClain may play shortstop, we can get into that. But, he is not known for his range, okay? But the balls he gets to, for the most part, he plays accurately, he's solid, he's dependable, and at the plate, you know what you're going to get out of him. He worked out of an early season slump. He's hitting, now let's see, get my stat sheet right here in front of me.
I believe he's leading the team.
262 with 22 doubles, which is second behind Spencer Steer's, third behind Spencer Steer, 26, and Elly's 24. But he's got the 9 home runs. He's driven in 41 runs. He's walked 56 times. His offensive stats are there.
Yeah, that's why I just don't understand. I mean, I know he's been the subject of trade rumors time and time again, but as he told me, that means I'm doing something right. It's good to be wanted elsewhere. He obviously wants to stay in Cincinnati, but he kind of laughed and said, "Hey, if I'm the subject of all these rumors, must be doing something right." So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with all of the social media hate geared at Jonathan India, because I know the internet loves Tyler Stevenson and loves to talk about how great of a guy he is. And that's true. But I mean, Jonathan
No
India
doubt.
there too. I mean, they're pretty comparable people in terms of just the overall quality of the individual. And to watch him interact with his fiance and daughter, he is just also just stand up, all around respectful guy. And I enjoy speaking to him, and I am glad that he's hitting well. I mean, he's a guy that I cheer for. I want him to do well. I mean, all of the Reds, but especially Jonathan India, just because, again, he gives all media members respect, the time of
Yep.
day, as does Hunter Greene. So yeah, and I mean, India has been hot across, big stretches of the season. I mean, he's been honest to acknowledge the team's offensive struggles at times, and I think that is also appreciated by me. India is one to give honest answers, opposed to give, the politically correct answer in all situations. So I appreciate that, and yeah, I mean, I love Jonathan India. I think he's a great asset from an intangible perspective for this Reds team.
Elly De La Cruz, Monday night, 4 extra base hits, 2 home runs, 2 doubles. The guy, I don't know what other superlatives to use to describe his dynamic capabilities. I just don't. I mean, he is going to go through struggles like any young player does. We've seen it this year. He goes through stretches. Then he does what he does Monday night. It's amazing to watch. And I think, whether you're a fan or whether you do what we do, cover the team for a living, you sit back and appreciate a guy like that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest strides he's taken this season is, like you mentioned, I mean, last night enters game 1 of the series against the Marlins 0 for 13 at the plate, then erupts for 4 extra base hits, 2 home runs, and 2 doubles. Like, that's what we've seen consistently all season long. He's gone through, the ebbs and flows over the course of 162 games, but then he erupts for these historic games. I mean, he's making history, it seems like, Trags, every single week this season, whether it be home runs or extra base hits or stealing bases. I mean, David Bell said yesterday, I think one of the reporters asked, does it ever get old to talk about Elly making more baseball history? And he said, no, but at the same time, am I surprised? Not really. So it's incredible to cover Elly. I think I am grateful because we're watching baseball history being made every single night, watching Elly De La Cruz play. And I know the Reds, I mean, their chances of making the playoffs with every loss are getting slimmer and slimmer. They're not completely out of it, but I think that not only Cincinnati, but the whole nation has really tuned into the Reds this season for Elly De La Cruz.
No question.
And it's just been, I mean, I know the word electric is so overused, but it truly is what you get when you go to the ballpark to watch Elly De La Cruz. You might have to go through a little bit of a slump and 0 for 13 stretch at the plate here and there, but then you get to see 2 home runs, exit velo, like 110 off the bat 4 times, balls being crushed by Elly De La Cruz. And I mean, must-see TV.
After the game, here's one thing I noticed about Elly. After a great game, after a bad game, after just a normal run-of-the-mill game, 1 for 4 RBI single in the 3rd inning, he's the same guy. He doesn't really get too high, too low. He's very for a 22-year-old athlete. And maybe some of it's still acclimating, the language barrier, which he's done a remarkable job from the beginning of this year going forward. He's acclimated himself there. He's acclimating himself to becoming a major league ball player for a full season, because he got caught up in the middle of 2023. Whatever it is, he just seems so steady all the time emotionally.
Yeah, I think when you go into the clubhouse, he's often one of the most reserved and quiet players on the team. I think that him being able to speak a lot more English this season has definitely helped us and the fans understand Elly a little bit more. But something that I've noticed is no matter if he has a good game or a bad game, when I'm beside the dugout on the field reporting, he's always happy. Yes. And if he's not having a good game, he's happy for someone else. If someone else hits a home run or, makes an amazing defensive stop, he's going to come off the field and congratulate that person with the biggest smile on his face. So that's something that I really admire and appreciate about Elly. And I think, again, for being 22 years old and just being so happy all the time. I mean, maybe it's an act. I don't know, but it surely doesn't seem
like
I
don't. Yeah, I definitely don't think it's an act. Having been around enough athletes and watching how he comports himself when the camera's on and when the camera's off, I think it's very genuine. I think that's one of the reasons I love covering the kid, is because I think everything he exudes is from his heart. And you can tell when a young player loves the game. What you mentioned, standing in the dugout, right next to the dugout, wherever your position is, you can see his smile. And if he's smiling during, the second inning of a 2-1 ball game, just joking around and enjoying himself, that to me is pretty genuine and pretty authentic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I said it was an actor. I referenced that because I don't know how anyone is that happy all the time. But I mean, he truly is. Yeah, I mean, so much fun to watch. I mean, I feel blessed to cover him because, yeah, he's amazing. I'm so happy that he's enjoying some success this season, more continued success that we saw bits and pieces of last season. But to do what he's doing in a first full big league season,
right?
I mean, we're watching history. That's all I can really say.
I am curious, Annie Sabo, to see whether or not Nick Kroll, Bob Castellini, Reds management do with Elly what they did with Hunter Greene. And that is give him the best possible deal early in his first contract, whatever, to extend him for as long as they can, to kick that can down the road so that he's not just playing here 5 years. And then at the end of those 5 years, it's sayonara because of free agency, and the Reds may not be able to financially match an offer from wherever, the Yankees, Boston, LA, wherever it is. And I would even say at this point, based on what we've seen, we know Matt McLain's a terrific ball player, but we know Elly De La Cruz is something different for the Reds. He's transformative. I love using that word when I can. He is a transformative player to a professional sports franchise. I'm pretty sure the Reds recognize that, not only on the field, but at the box office, clearly. We've seen all those statistics. What do you think the chances are that the Reds get as aggressive as they can and extend him?
That's a good question, because if I were in the Reds front office, I would do exactly whatever Elly wanted in terms of long-term deals like Hunter Greene, because I think so much of this ball club's mantra is we're building for the future. All right, so you signed last year Hunter to a long-term deal. If you are truly building for the future, you have Elly De La Cruz, the next superstar of the game, the current superstar of the game, potential Hall of Famer if he continues on this tear, right? I mean, you have to keep him in Cincinnati and give him what he wants, not only, for results on the field, but as you mentioned, I mean, I assume Elly De La Cruz baseball jerseys are what, top 5, top 10
in MLB, no question.
Yeah. So, I mean, from an all-around perspective, I just think you give Elly what he wants to stay in Cincinnati for as long as he wants to play baseball. And if you were to ask Elly, I'm sure he wants to play baseball until he's like 60 years old. So, yeah, I mean, I think you have to get a deal done in the offseason to keep Elly in Cincinnati long-term because, I mean, keeps the fans happy. If you're building for the future.
I'm not always into message sending, Annie. Yeah. But when you signed Hunter Greene, it sent a very positive message that we view him as a core. We're going to sign him as such. We value him. deal done. That's a very good message for a franchise, frankly, that could use that in that particular area, financial commitment to star players. If you do the same for Elly, you've done it for Hunter, and now you do it for Elly. I think it shuts up a lot of the critics who say the Reds aren't willing to invest in their star players. You're not going to be able to be the New York Yankees and do it for 5 players. Heck, they are barely able to do it if you believe what they're saying. Even the Yankees have trouble legitimizing those kind of contracts for Judge and Stanton and going and Soto. They have trouble doing that. But if the Reds can do it for a guy like Elly De La Cruz, it just sends such a positive message about what they are trying to build on the field.
Yeah, and I think so too. I mean, they paid Joey Votto. Joey Votto was the face of the franchise for, close to 20 years, right? I think the Reds are in a unique situation to pay Elly, pay Hunter, and then you have 2 young faces, not only of the Reds, but of the league. I mean, I think that puts the Reds on the map regardless of results. I mean, I think, signing them to long-term deals and building around those 2 pieces would be great for this ball club's future. But I just think being able to put Elly and Hunter together and to sign them long-term would do so much good for this ball club. And hey, I mean, you signed Hunter to a long-term deal. How's his season panning out? Pretty good.
Yeah. And not only that, but again, so much of roster building, franchise building really is about signing your core players and sending the message not only to fans, but internally that we're committed to winning. We're not just committed to putting a team on the field. We're committed to winning. All right. I want to move on to a more personal note. How's Dad doing?
He's good. He's as good as he can be. He is recovering from shoulder surgery. So he's probably at the, 5-week mark post-surgery. He's doing a lot better, but he still wants to be able to be at 100% to golf and to win.
I was going to say, he loves his golf.
Yes, he does. So he's been unable to golf. He's currently watching my daughter with my mom while I am here on this road trip with Cincinnati. So that's been really fun to kind of watch my 1-year-old daughter and him interact. My 1-year-old daughter, Mia, is obsessed with my dad. So they have a cute little bond working. But health-wise, hopefully the shoulder gets 100% and then he'll be ready to go. But he'll be in Cincinnati with me, when I return from this road trip all month of August. So it's been really nice having him and my mom around pretty much all summer with me.
I'm sure you've been asked this, but what was the one piece of advice or several bits of advice that he gave you about this job that you have now, given his background, his reputation in the city, how beloved he is still as a Red Star of the last World Series champion? What kind of advice did he give you when you took the gig?
You know what? A lot of people don't ask me that. The number one question I get asked is, do we still have the goggles? And yes, they're somewhere in the house. And I think I've worn a version of them one time on the air. But yes, the goggles are somewhere. That's the number one question that I get asked every single day on every single podcast. And I don't think they look very good on me. So with the hair and everything.
Okay, I'm going to go off the rails here. Did that not come up last year, if I recall?
Yes, it was. Yes. Last year, and I don't know if I brought them from home or it was some kind of.
I think it was early in the season on a homestand. If I may be misremembering.
I did it with Chris Welsh, and apparently it was a hit and everything. But yes, goggles are somewhere in our house, along with all of we have a World Series trophy, a replica in our house, but like all of the rings and stuff, that's hidden in the safe somewhere that I don't even know where it is. Anyway, the biggest piece of advice my dad has given me, I think he's just always taught my sisters and I. My sisters are not in the broadcasting field. They work normal jobs like normal people. I'm the crazy one for pursuing this career. But I just think he always taught us to dream and dream big, and whatever we really wanted to accomplish in life, that we're more than capable. I think that one of his biggest assets is he was able to, throughout the course of his career, ignore the naysayers and just continue to be confident in himself regardless of, if he was slumping at the plate or if he was forced to, play in the outfield in a game where he wasn't really comfortable. I think that's something that I so admire about my dad, is that he's able to shake off criticism and not let it get to him. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I've taken from him. He always tells me, is your boss happy? Yeah, I think so. Well, then who cares what other people say? And I just think that broadcasting, it's a career.
So true.
like baseball, it's a game of failure. And I think broadcasting is just so competitive, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself in some instances, and there's not many jobs out there. And after COVID, there are so many, it went from 50 jobs to there's now 10 jobs available. So I think being able to ignore some of the outside noise and criticism is something that I've really learned from my dad, something that's I'm still working on, mind you, but especially in the day of social media. I mean, I think social media is good and bad, but I think for me, my job would be much easier without it in some ways. But I think, just the ability to dream, and not only that, because I think dreaming without putting in hard work is nothing. I've gotten my work ethic from my dad. He and I are very similar in terms of personality. Behind the scenes, I'm very fiery. I'm well behaved at work, but I'm very fiery. Work really hard. And I mean, sometimes that's not enough. And sometimes I don't have a perfect game, but I think in the land of baseball, you're not going to go for 4 with 4 extra bases like Elly Cruz every single day. So that's something I learned from him.
Are you having fun? Because to me, this job, obviously you want to be a professional, and you take pride in how you deliver yourself in front of the camera or in front of a microphone. How you present yourself is a better word. How you present yourself in front of the camera or in front of the microphone. But if you're having fun, and someone once told me this, even in radio, if you're smiling when you talk, you sound so much better than when you don't. And it was one of the biggest bits of advice I was ever given in broadcast. Rick DeFranco, a friend of mine, and my first boss in radio up in Northern New York, gave me that advice, and it stuck with me forever to this day. And I just think you're an example of that, because I think you're always smiling. And when you're always smiling, the delivery is much different, much more energetic.
I have never heard that piece of advice before, but I'm glad that I'm smiling all the time, because I don't necessarily feel like I am in my head. But I have never heard that piece of advice before. Yep. I've been told 50 other things before, but like we all are in broadcasting, but I've never heard that. And no, I'm having so much fun. Yeah. And unfortunately, going into the season, I thought the record would be a little bit better than it is right now. And I would love nothing more for this team to make the postseason and cover that. That would be, oh my gosh, I would die. And I think the city of Cincinnati would just be so ecstatic. It's not out of the picture yet, but I just think, yes, I'm having fun. I hope maybe next year they make the postseason and bring,
this team, here's my feeling on this team. The team is what it is this year because it's missed so much time from key players. Right. They would take a near miraculous run at the end of it. It would involve 8 to 10 game winning streak without question. You need one of those plus consistency for the rest of the year. And frankly, they just haven't demonstrated that over a long enough period of time. This team is built for 2025. You get all of the pieces back. You add 1 or 2 players. You don't need to add that much, just maybe 1 or 2 key veterans in the offseason. This team is built to take off in 2025. I'm very convinced of that.
And one of those key pieces, I hope the Reds go out and acquire. I was talking to Jeff Brantley yesterday. Like, in his words, a bona fide big league hitter to put in the middle of the lineup who's been consistent, who is a veteran, who's played in the big leagues for quite some time, has a bit more postseason experience from a leadership perspective. And I think you have a winning combination. I think that would be a great recipe for success for Cincinnati. I hope they do go out and be a little bit more aggressive this offseason in terms of maybe providing a little bit more offense from a veteran perspective.
I'm not to interrupt you, Annie, but I don't think this team's too far off offensively if you believe in 2 players. Christian Encarnacion Strand and Noelve Marte over a full course of a regular season. You add a veteran bat in between those two, absolutely. And maybe Tyler Stevenson takes that next step and he's that cleanup hitter next year. Who knows? But you add a veteran bat in the middle of that order, and I think you're onto something.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen great offensive stretches by this team, and by great, we're talking like tops in all of baseball from a scoring perspective and a home run perspective in the month of July, right? I just think you need, a veteran guy somewhere in the middle of the lineup who not necessarily is a power hitter, just someone who can hit the ball to all fields, who can put the ball in play to let the other guys on this team currently, drive them in and do some work. But that's what I think I would add in the offseason. And maybe one more veteran, either starter on the mound, like a Frankie Montas, to, complement some of these younger guys. And I think 2025 will be a better year with some more wins.
I think it shapes up, if everybody's healthy, as a very special year. That's what I think. And it will be the 50th anniversary of my very favorite baseball season of all time. Obviously, Reds fans who realize I'm talking about the 75-108 win World Series champion over the Boston Red Sox, Cincinnati Reds. So I think it would be appropriate, Annie.
Yeah, unfortunately wasn't alive in 75, but
I went to game 4 and with my dad, and it was one of my very favorite baseball memories. Might be my number one baseball memory. Actually.
I just think, if the Reds can in the near future, like the Arizona Diamondbacks, right, last season, can make a run like they did in the postseason within, the next 3 seasons or something. Oh my gosh, that would just be, can you imagine what that would do to Cincinnati and the Reds? I mean, absolutely nuts. And I think that's what the city needs and craves, right? The bank, you've had some success, a taste of success in terms of, the football in Cincinnati, but to bring that same level of success to the Reds, man. So good.
I think the 1-2 punch. Look, Burrow is Burrow, and the Bengals are the Bengals, and right now they're top dog. I don't think there's any disputing that at all. But every Cincinnati sports fan wants to see the Reds come back to relevance, and you begin that in this town, and that's what I think can happen this year. You have taken so much time out of your day before a game, Annie. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much for taking time out.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. She is Annie Sabo, does a tremendous job covering the Cincinnati Reds for Bally Sports Cincinnati, both on the Reds Live pregame and postgame shows, as well as her duties on the field reporting, and you can catch her there. I want to thank Annie Sabo for joining me on this episode of the Code Reds podcast, and thank all of our fine folks at CLNS Media for delivering this podcast throughout the various platforms where you can download and enjoy. Until next time, I'm Mike Petralia, and this has been the Code Reds podcast.